to Gibbs, goes to the sideline. Nice catch and move by Holton towards the end zone.
With the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft in the books, I thought it would be appropriate to take a second to review it, even though I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this video will age poorly. I'm not shy about my takes, and I have plenty coming in this video that will likely surprise you. We will discuss the winners and losers of the draft, as well as grade each first round pick. Alright, let's get started. Well, this one was obvious, wasn't it? The NFL wants this pick to be as much a mystery as possible, yet year after year we always know beyond any reasonable doubt who is going first overall. Still, if you're a Panthers fan, you have to be excited about this after years of Bridgewater, Darnold, and Mayfield. But consider how much the Panthers gave up to trade for this pick. 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and DJ Moore? That's a haul you give up for a generational quarterback, yes, but how generational can someone as tiny as Bryce Young be? Even if he isn't the franchise savior immediately, in that division you have to think that this move makes the Panthers contenders for a playoff spot. For that alone, I give this pick a grade of B+. Good start to the draft.
They bring late pressure. It's picked up. Stroud right down the middle. Touchdown!
Before we get to the pick itself, I just want to note how much money Vegas fleeced out of people by convincing them Will Levis was going here. We all had Stroud pegged to go at number 2 overall before the odds convinced us otherwise. Someone really wanted Stroud to fall to them. There are 2 lessons to learn here. Stick to your guts and don't gamble. As for Stroud himself, he's an easy guy to root for, having grown up without a father in a small apartment above a storage facility. Still, the question is how much upside does Stroud have? Could the Texans have got a player of similar caliber by waiting, either later in this draft or for next year? In my opinion, probably, but it's worth remembering why we all thought Stroud would go here in the first place. The Texans desperately need a quarterback, and the front office really couldn't afford to wait for one. For their impatience, I award the pick a grade of B-. Alright, we see you Texans. We know you're trying, and we know you just picked up probably the best defensive player in the draft. But can we take a second to consider the price you paid to get here? A first and a second this year, plus your own first and a third next year? That's a quarterback's ransom being spent on a non-quarterback. Anderson himself is phenomenal, but is he really that much better than the other edge rushers the Texans could have got by staying put? Isn't this considered to be a weaker class overall? It's certainly a gamble, but if Stroud and Anderson develop the way the Texans think they will, we might look back in a few years and say they got the best offensive and defensive players in the draft. That is a big if, and one that knocks my grade for this pick down to a solid B+. I'm going to let anyone new to the channel know right off the bat that I am a big Richardson fan. I have an entire video on this channel about why I would have taken him number 1, even with as raw and inexperienced as he is. I discussed in that video the different places he might land, and guess which team was my favorite? The Colts have a solid team already, assuming Jonathan Taylor can stay healthy, and the offensive line plays like we are back in 2021. The high upside pick was warranted by the Colts. After all, they play in the same division as Trevor Lawrence. Richardson was the only player available who gives the Colts a chance to compete for the division. There's always a risk when you take a quarterback like this, but for my tastes, this pick deserves a solid A grade. Now here is an unequivocally great pick. Years after the death of the legendary Legion of Boom, the Seahawks have taken a guy who is as aggressive as they come in every aspect of his game. In fact, his only weakness is that he might make too aggressive a tackle and throw out his shoulder in the process. The Seahawks might have difficulty getting pressure on the defensive line next season, but with Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen patrolling the secondary, you have to think Seattle is going to get plenty of coverage sacks. No mystery here, this pick is an A for me, bordering on A+, although I don't think the value is quite there to get to that point. The Cardinals were the big wheelers and dealers during the draft this year, and in the aggregate they picked up a first-round pick next year plus 2/3 to move back 3 total spots. That's not a bad haul to get alongside the guy you wanted all along. Who they ended up taking is questionable though, I guess, as other offensive tackles probably have higher upside. Still, Paris Johnson Jr. is a high-character guy who will be a Walter Payton Man of the Year candidate the second he steps on a football field, so I'll be rooting for him in every step of his career. For the pick itself, trade compensation included, I would say a B+. Hey, the Raiders drafted a player that was actually at the draft. How weird. I'll preface this section by saying I like Wilson coming out and that he is an athletic freak who has all the potential to be a great pass rusher in this league. I just don't like the situation he has found himself in. I don't for a second believe head coach Josh McDaniels has a single solitary clue what the hell he is doing, and the defensive coordinator Patrick Graham is of questionable quality. It's always a bad sign when your best coaches might be other players like Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. Combine this with the fact that the Raiders had much more pressing needs to address, and I can't say I'm too excited about this pick. Through no fault of his own, Wilson has ended up in a situation that gives him high bust potential. If any other team made this pick, it would probably be a B grade, but for the Raiders, I would give it a C. And the Falcons continue to aggressively draft best player available even when it comes to running backs. You have to think it's a great fit though. The Falcons ran the ball more than any team last year, and they have a fantastic offensive line to facilitate Bijan's success far into the future. It would not surprise me at all to see Bijan go off for 2,000 total yards in his rookie season. Is that enough to make drafting a running back this high worth it though? All I know is that there will be no excuses for new quarterback Desmond Ridder when he starts. He will have as much skill position talent around him as a first-year starter could ask for. This is a decent planning on the franchise level pick, so even with positional value weighted, I would give it a solid B- grade. I'm going to throw a little cold water on all the proclamations that Howie Roseman has done it again. Drafting the best player in the draft this late is something only he could pull off. The extra day 3 pick they threw in to move up one spot is largely immaterial to me. What matters is what goes on in Carter's head. He is a guy who desperately needs to grow up and fast, and I don't think the millions of dollars he is about to get are going to help with that. Combine that with the questions about his endurance and conditioning, and we have another pick with high bust potential. If the Eagles can keep him in line, they do have quite the steal, but that is a big if. Drafting Nolan Smith later certainly helps, but we will see if it is enough. This pick gets a C grade purely for making me so uncomfortable. The Bears started with the number 1 pick and turned it into 2 firsts, 2 seconds, DJ Moore, and now the guy who, in my opinion, is the best tackle in the class. Wright played his best games against his best competition in the best conference in college football. This pick also gets bonus points for filling a desperate need to help keep Justin Fields upright to see if he can really be the franchise quarterback for the Bears. Because as we all know, one bad offensive lineman can easily sink the entire ship. Wright is a questionable scheme fit and will likely need time to acclimate to the Bears' zone blocking scheme, but that's my only minor quibble. This is a straight up A grade for me, no questions asked. Tennessee, don't you think this is a little high to be taking a guard? Maybe they think he can play tackle for them even with his T-Rex arms, but in fairness to the Titans, Skoronski is a special talent at a position of desperate need. Their entire offensive line has been decimated these past 2 years, and Skoronski can be the anchor they need right away. My major concern here is the opportunity cost of passing on positions of much greater value, as Broderick Jones was still on the board for them. Regardless, the Titans do get bonus points for passing on Will Levis, even if they eventually got him in the second round. This is a B- grade pick, I think. Alright, I know I'm not the only one, but I got some things to say about this pick. Firstly, yeah, it's a running back. This isn't a high-value position, and the Lions already had decent players on their depth chart like Swift and Montgomery. Second, the Lions need a cornerback, and there are several great ones left on the board. Thirdly, there were plenty of guys the Lions could have taken in the second to fourth rounds, like Charbonnet or Spears, who could have filled a similar role for them. I'm sure Gibbs will have a great start to his career in that offense, but the longevity of a running back's career is always in question, and they could have gotten similar guys for much cheaper later in the draft. Even with all of the extra picks they got in their trade to get back to this spot, this is a straight-up F-grade pick. I wasn't very high on Van Ness early in this process, and I haven't changed my mind since. This dollar store Bosa brother is more of a bodybuilder than a defensive lineman right now. He is just too raw and developmental to be worth this high of a pick. I get that it fills a position of need for the Packers because they don't have much pass rush outside of Rashawn Gary, but new quarterback Jordan Love desperately needs help on offense, and the Packers could have had JSN or Dalton Kincaid here. I knew the Packers would never take those guys because it's the Packers, but I'm still disappointed nonetheless. Still, Van Ness gets some bonus points for probably being Barry McCockner's wife's new crush. That bumps this up to a D grade. I'll never understand why the Patriots traded out of this pick, but hey, their loss is the Steelers' gain. All it cost the Steelers to move up and grab the last great offensive lineman on the board before the Jets could take him was a measly fourth rounder. It's a price worth paying for a guy with the highest upside at the position. I know the temptation to grab Joey Porter Jr. was strong, but protecting your franchise quarterback in Kenny Pickett is more important than making a legacy pick. Plus, the Steelers got Porter later anyway, so they get to have their cake and eat it too. Great pick by the Steelers, who are certainly a draft winner in my book. A-grade pick. This pick wasn't as big a reach for me as it was for a lot of other people. McDonald played in a really weird 3-3-5 front in college that didn't let him rush the passer often, but when he did, he was great at it. The Jets could certainly use depth at the edge rusher position, but I have one burning question. Why not Nolan Smith? Aside from the pass rushing, is there anything McDonald does better than Smith? And even with the pass rushing, McDonald is going to be a part of a heavy rotation, meaning he won't be able to tee off on the quarterback as much as he might like to. Maybe the Jets felt he was a better scheme fit, but the opportunity cost more than anything makes this a C+ pick for me. Alright, I've seen enough That Franchise Guy videos to know that this is a great scheme fit for the Commanders, but I'm going to rip the pick regardless. Bottom line, there were bigger and better cornerbacks available to be taken, and the Commanders grabbed the guy who is smaller than I am. His ball skills might be off the charts, but you always have to wonder when a guy is thrown at enough to be able to make that many plays, as even the dumbest quarterbacks know enough not to throw at the best cornerbacks. Forbes has apparently been gaining weight this offseason, but we will see if he can play at that weight with the same athleticism he had in college. The scheme fit stops this from being an F pick. Instead, I will give it a D-. Considering this is my team making a pick widely regarded as one of the biggest steals of the draft, you would think I would be more excited about it. I see the potential in Gonzalez, but I have too many question marks to really get hyped. I think he's got the athleticism to be one of the highest ceiling players in this draft, and I know he is still learning the position after playing a lot of safety in high school, but I still feel like opposing quarterbacks had too much success throwing at him in college. I also have questions about his effort in the running game. He might be the best corner in the draft eventually, but he will have to get much better in a tougher league for that to happen, and I'm just not confident he will be able to do that. This is a B- pick for upside, but that's as high as I'm willing to go. I actually don't hate this pick, even if the positional value isn't there. Campbell is one of the most underrated players in this draft in my book, and the Lions could use some help on defense stopping the run. Still, you can't help but think what the Lions are doing. Picking a running back and a linebacker in the first round would make sense if this was the 1970s, but in 2023, the game has evolved into a perpetual display of passing prowess, or lack thereof. A run-stuffing linebacker can't help your team, but not enough to really move the needle, so to speak, enough to turn losses into wins. You have to think opposing teams will have just as much success throwing against the Lions this season as they did last season. All things considered, I still give this pick a grade of B. Now here is the guy who is the most difficult evaluation of this draft cycle. Kancey is too big to play end or linebacker, too small to play tackle, and his arms are too short for any position really. And yet he was stupidly productive as a pass rusher in college. He can't eat up space like a traditional two-gapper, but he doesn't have to in the Buccaneers scheme playing next to the behemoth that is Vita Vea. I give the Buccaneers bonus points for not reaching on an offensive lineman, and more bonus points for passing on Will Levis. But I just don't know how Kancey's game will translate to the next level. My suspicions lead me to give this pick a C+ grade. Man, the Seahawks really knocked it out of the park this year, didn't they? They grabbed both the best cornerback and the best receiver in the class. The receiving corps of JSN, Lockett, and Metcalf will be one of the best in the league. I'm still suspicious of Geno Smith as the long-term answer at quarterback, but admittedly he doesn't have much wear and tear on his body, having spent most of his career as a backup. Having so many great receiving options will also help to prolong the productive stage of his career. I don't see JSN as a future All-Pro, but he's a great possession receiver with a decent ceiling. This is an A- pick for me. On the surface, it would seem the Chargers did what the Seahawks did, making their receiving corps every bit as frightening for Justin Herbert next season. But I don't know, I'm just not as high on Quentin Johnston as I am on JSN, who for me is the only first-round receiver in this class. Johnston is the best receiver in the class with the ball in his hands, but getting it there can be a concern. He just doesn't do the things you associate with bigger wide receivers well. He certainly doesn't have the greatest hands, and certainly not in the contested catch situations, and he is jammed far too easily in press coverage. A high upside pick for sure, but one that I don't think is going to work out. I give this pick a C+ grade for the upside, but I'm not happy about it. This is a pick meant to make Lamar Jackson happy, make no mistake about it. Zay Flowers is a smaller possession receiver with good route running ability. That alone makes him valuable in the NFL. The problem is that players like that are growing on trees in this draft. Half the guys in this class fit that description. The Ravens had more pressing needs that could have been filled, such as by taking Deonte Banks at cornerback. They play in a division with the Bengals and need an answer for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Instead, they got a player for whom similar players were available later in the draft. Overall, this is a C- pick for me, all things considered. Basically everything I said about the Ravens taking Zay Flowers applies to this pick as well. Smaller possession receiver who is a good route runner. If you need a guy like that, Josh Downs is available much cheaper in the second. The pick once again was at corner, or maybe defensive interior, as basically the entire depth chart at that position is on the last year of their deals for the Vikings. This feels like a luxury pick for a team that can't afford to make one, as no team overperformed last year more than the Vikings. I see them as a very likely crash and burn candidate this year. This pick is a C for me, but only because the Vikings unfortunately can't throw to Justin Jefferson on every play. In isolation, I think this was one of the best picks of the draft. Banks was my number 2 cornerback in this class, so to get him at 24th overall is a steal. That said, the Giants traded 2 day 3 picks to move up one spot when 2 great cornerbacks were available and they were guaranteed one of them. Is Banks really that much better than Joey Porter Jr.? I'm not sure, but that is admittedly a minor concern, and Banks is worth the extra draft capital in my book. Without the extra trade compensation, this would be an A pick for me, but in totality, the Giants will have to settle for an A-. It pains me to say it as a Patriots fan, but I really think the Bills have had the best draft this year, starting with the future superstar in Dalton Kincaid. This is a luxury pick for a team that can afford to take it. The Bills have had too much experience with the difficulties a player like Travis Kelce can cause a defense, and Kincaid offers a very similar skill set. He will never be a great run blocker at the position, but if he posts double-digit touchdowns each year, which is not exactly an unreasonable expectation, nobody is going to notice or care. The only thing that stops this from being an A-plus pick is positional value, as tight ends are not a very highly valued position, but the pick gets a solid A grade from me. This guy was number 1 on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list for a reason. It just so happens that he also fills a desperate need for Dallas, who ranked 22nd against the run last year. Their defensive interior was atrocious even before Jonathan Hankins went down to injury last season. The inability to stop the run was one of the things that allowed the 49ers to knock them out of the playoffs 2 years running. I'm going to offer my hottest take of the video here. I think the value for Mazi Smith at 26 is greater than the value for Jalen Carter at 9. Yep, I said it. I give this pick an A grade, and I have no reservations about it. The Jaguars are an ascending team, and with picks like this, it's not hard to see why. They got a number of late-round picks to move back only a couple of spots, and they managed to pick up maybe the best pass-blocking tackle in the class. His run blocking isn't going to do Travis Etienne any favors, but this team will only go as far as Trevor Lawrence will take them. I think if I was the Jaguars, I would have taken Kincaid myself at 25, but I won't knock them too much for that. After all, they lost Jawan Taylor to the Chiefs and Cam Robinson to a PED suspension, so this was a pick that was desperately needed. Even if I wasn't quite as high on Harrison throughout the process, I give this pick a B+ grade, bordering on A-. This feels like the right spot for Murphy, a player with all the athletic tools to be a great edge defender who has not, to this point at least, managed to put it all together. The Bengals ranked 29th in sacks last season, but you have to wonder how much Miles is going to change that right off the bat. He's a developmental prospect who ought to be taken around the time such players ought to be taken. This guy is going to have to improve a lot and fast if he wants to so much as get a hand on Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs next season, which is what Cincinnati needs him to do. Average pick, I give it a grade of C+. Lots of players have down years, but none have as great an excuse for doing so as this guy. He tore his ACL, got a kidney infection, and lost his sister to brain cancer all in 1 year. Special allowances have to be given for that, especially for a player with the talent to go much, much higher than this. Brzee was a top recruit out of high school for a reason. He's a behemoth at the position and is capable of handling 2-gap responsibilities, even if he will rarely need to in New Orleans. It wouldn't surprise me to see this mentioned as the steal of the draft years down the line. This pick gets my only A+ grade for the first round. I was very high on Nolan Smith throughout the entire process because of how many things he does well. He's a great run blocker and coverage guy, as well as being universally recognized as a great team leader. I have to question the scheme fit here though, as I always saw Smith as a fit for a 3-4 outside linebacker role. Did the Eagles intend to have him play wide 9? Regardless, this was a needed pick to keep Jalen Carter in check, so it gets bonus points for that. Overall, there are a lot of reasons to be excited for this pick if you're an Eagles fan. I give it an A- grade. I feel a little whelmed by this pick. Uzomah has plenty of pros and cons to his game. He seems developmental, but Andy Reid says he expects him to start right away. He is certainly in a position to succeed, as Chris Jones will garner so much attention it will leave Uzomah in plenty of one-on-one situations. I was not a fan of this guy throughout the process, and now he has been drafted by the Chiefs, meaning he will almost certainly be a superstar. I can't say that with complete certainty, however, so I give this pick a C grade. And that's the video. Give this video a like if you enjoyed the content, and leave a comment to let me know how wrong you think I am about Jalen Carter, or anything else that you found noteworthy. Have a great day, and peace out.